there's different ways to think about a volunteer-led organization. We are choosing to operate in a spirit of high autonomy and kind of bottoms up activation. So if you feel like you're not getting a lot of instruction about what to go do, just know that that's actually a little bit by design. We want to organically, empower you as leaders to show up and get involved in local reform efforts where they exist. And in some cases, they may not exist, but I don't want you feeling like you're not doing your role. Having you associated with us, having your name and your reputation on our website associated with the state in which you live is in and of itself important and impactful, because we've got a lot of media partners and funders and elected officials looking at what we're doing, wondering what we're doing. And to be able to say, hey, we've got 188 upstanding individuals who have all served the country in some form and are, raising their hand to say we ought to have better politics, and to have 38 states covered, that's a big deal. So I just want to normalize. Some of you are very active in this work, leading election reform efforts. Some of you are just curious, haven't done anything yet. This might be your first call, and that is totally fine. You all belong. We need you here, and just we give it some space and some time, and you'll figure out kind of how to create a lane for yourself that feels, authentic to who you are, what you care about, what you want to be doing. We also have on this call Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians and Green Party folks, everyone. And that's important. And we love that. We put politics aside when we get on these calls, and because we actually just have come to the point of view that regardless of what party you're affiliated with, we're never going to get the outcomes that we deserve as a country if we can't change the incentive structure that this system is currently designed for. So those are my opening remarks. I want to, Eric, give you the chance to make some opening remarks and then introduce a couple folks. And then I got a couple things I want to share, but we want to hear from you all as well. So Eric, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Todd. Thanks for everyone being here today. And as Todd said, we really are growing this mission and growing this community together with all of you. One of our core values is that we're playing the long game, and we know we will be friends when our mission is complete or when our work is done. So we really value friendship more than just trying to, the mission is important. Absolutely, yes. But we don't ever want someone to feel like we're just using you and your time and your talent and treasure to get the mission done. We're building this together and in a way that hopefully feels, mutually beneficial. So Todd mentioned we're up to actually almost 40 states represented now, and we're pushing over 200 volunteer state leaders. So it's really exciting. And Todd and I are tracking 5 states that are the most active or maybe the most important to some of our national funders and partners. And then about another 5 states that are very important to us as an organization because there's Final 5 voting or Final 4 voting campaigns coming online soon. Then you have about another 8 or 9 states where just this week, for example, New Mexico, their legislation was passed to open primaries in New Mexico in the state Senate. Now it has to go to the state House. So every week I'm usually sharing calls to action in the Slack channel. So if you're not active on Slack, please stop slacking off, pun intended. No, I'm not Mr. Technology. I don't love having another technology platform to check on. I get it. But if you're able to check in once a week, and see there'll be new articles shared or new calls to action or people introducing themselves. So please hop on there. And then one person I just wanted to highlight real quick is Josh Daniels. I saw him on here, who's a personal hero of mine. Josh served as a local election official in a county, as a Republican in a county in Utah. I don't know which county, Josh can tell us, but he also testified in favor of the Final 5 voting bill that's pending in Wisconsin. Did a fantastic job. And so just really excited to have Josh on board and joining us for the first time for this call. If you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, my name's Josh Daniels, and I live in Utah's second largest county, which is called Utah County, and just finished my term of office as the county clerk and auditor, where I oversaw elections for our county, including the 2020 election, which is quite difficult to be an election official in the wake of the 2020 election, as there was a lot of conspiracy theory energy in our community and just kind of dealing with misinformation. One of the things that I've always been passionate about is ranked choice voting. And interestingly, a lot of my friends that I serve with, I served in the Marines. Oddly, they like ranked choice voting. So there's something about logical solutions that appeal to veterans. So in Utah County, we actually were the first county to do ranked choice voting in Utah for local municipal elections. And that's something I'm very passionate about and been involved in talking to other states and helping election officials and legislators around the country to feel more comfortable with that type of an innovation, which is a key part of Final Four or Final Five voting. A couple of movements I'll call out that are useful right now. You may or may not be aware that some states are considering using ranked choice voting for their upcoming presidential primary next year. There's a really important tie-in for the military community, because for those overseas voters who might try to cast a ballot in a presidential primary, by the time that ballot gets back and is counted, their favorite candidate might have dropped out. And so using a ranked choice style ballot allows those votes to still count. And there's bills in Georgia that would deal with that, Virginia, Vermont recently visited there and talked to some of their legislators. There's a few states where it's probably not going to pass, but there's a few where it might, and it would be a great innovation. So that's a little bit about me and my involvement. And if any of you have needs, you want to run an election idea by somebody that's been inside that operation, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to be a helpful resource for any of you or any of your states or anything like that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. And Josh, I just mentioned you to my two local election officials who I met with, one Republican, one Democrat here in St. Louis County, as just someone that I look up to. And so please, if this is another call to action that anyone can do at any time. One, local election officials are they are the unsung heroes of our American democracy. It's been a very tough 4 years for many, if not most of them. And so just going and telling them you're grateful, maybe buy them a cup of coffee, and then find out more about what are their challenges, and then what are the opportunities are they familiar with ranked choice voting, instant runoff? Are they familiar with Final Five voting? That's a big win. So thanks, Josh. And there's other new volunteers on here. We got a couple veterans in South Dakota, Chris Ronis and Brian Bangs in South Dakota, new to the team. We got Ryan Lilly down in Texas, new to the team. So there's lots of, and if I don't call you out, I apologize, but it's just really exciting to have new folks getting on board with this mission. So I'm going to pass it back off to my fearless co-founder, Todd Connor.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And I'm going to actually spotlight a couple other folks. Jim Jones from Idaho, really excited to have you on board. I'm going to sing your praises a little bit and then see if I can get a perspective from you. Jim is the former Attorney General for the state of Idaho, as well as the former Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court. So a really distinct, as well as I want to say Army veteran, Jim. Did I get that right?
Right.
Okay.
U.S. Army, Vietnam.
The U.S. Army served during Vietnam. And so just a treasure trove, experienced public servant in so many regards, and reached out to us because he's building an effort in Idaho for election reform. So we're thrilled to have someone of your stature, Jim, on board. And Jim, maybe I'll go to you to share a little bit about what you're cooking up over there in Idaho.
Lots of ferment in my state. We've got two groups that are interested in running a Final Four. One is a group comprised mainly of Republicans, or at least they say they've got a lot of Republicans. The other is one that I've been working with. It's run a couple of initiatives in Idaho already, and they will be announcing an initiative probably in mid-April that will, I'm sure, get on the ballot for next year. People in the legislature have gotten wind of it apparently because just 2 days ago, a bill was introduced in the legislature to prohibit ranked choice voting, which of course we will add an addendum to our initiative to repeal any inconsistent legislation if they're able to get it through. So it's going to be a real fight here, but I think we've got people on both sides of the aisle and independents like myself who are going to get it on the ballot. And I think there's a decent chance of getting it passed. We've just got to kind of coalesce the various groups and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That's fantastic. And we're excited to support that as well. Yinka Falati, I don't know, this is our board chair, distinguished board chair. And Yinka, I don't know if you're on the road, if you're able to come off mute, but I'd love for you to make a couple of remarks if you're able to. We've also got Dewan Wiltshire, another board member, calling in. Good to see you, Dewan. I'll look for any other board members that might be able to join. So Yinka, if you can come off mute, I'll look for you. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Just to Eric's point, here's sort of the state of play. We've got 17 state-based campaigns that we are partnering with. There are a few states that we are particularly focused on, Alaska being one, where we have to defend the Final Four voting model that has been implemented and I think had extraordinary success this last election cycle. But as you can expect, 18 state campaigns, Eric corrected me, including New Mexico. But as you can expect in Alaska, there is an effort to repeal or dismantle Final Four voting. And so we had a call yesterday with the Alaskans for Better Elections. We are going to be supporting the effort to keep the Final Four voting model. Their wargaming is if you can just get through another election cycle with the new model, it'll be very hard to repeal at that point because voters will have really just become committed to it. So there's this window that we're working with. We plan to be active in Alaska because it's an important example nationally for how this model can work. And it's also the first state to implement this model. The other thing that we know with ballot initiatives, and we heard this from Luis Caldera, who's the former Secretary of the Army, who also was in the California state legislature, which is even if a state passes the ballot initiative, the state legislature can often undo it. And it's a highly undemocratic fact, but it happens all across the United States. It's maddening to me that the will of the people can be overturned by the state legislature, but they do it sometimes. So that's what we're watching in Alaska, but the team there on the ground in Alaska is still optimistic it's going to stick, but we've got to kind of make sure it sticks through our efforts this year. The other place is Nevada, where the ballot initiative was passed last time, in large part thanks to the leadership of Mario Mitchell and Mike Escobar and other volunteers that we have in Nevada. Mike Escobar in particular, along with Lester Lumbad and some others, but they were like really the face of the campaign. It was all about veterans not being able to vote in closed primaries. That was really the headline message. And there's a lot of money spent on that. So it worked, but both parties were opposed and both parties are getting organized to oppose it again. So Nevada is going to be a hot spot. We plan to be active there. That is a Final Five campaign, for example, different from the Final Four model in Alaska, but Nevada is important. Other states that we're looking at, Nebraska is, I think, going to be active. Eric and I are headed out on March 1st or March 2nd. We're going to give testimony. Our state leader there, Rob Baines, is going to give testimony in Lincoln, Nebraska, where they are exploring a legislative proposal to move this forward. And then a number of other states, places like Idaho, South Dakota. There's a lot going on in Virginia. We're hopeful that Wisconsin can get a bill over the finish line this year. We think Missouri is going to be active with a ballot initiative, which was started last year, came short on signatures, hoping to revisit. But again, a lot of other places. So if I name them all, I'll miss some. But there's a lot of movement on the ground, and really, here's what we've seen as being the case. We don't, and this is what we say nationally, so I just want you to hear our talking points. Veterans for Political Innovation is not going to initiate a ballot initiative. We're not going to initiate a bill, but there are partners on the ground who will do that, who are doing that. And when they do, the role that we want to play is, supporting actor. We want to be, most people want to be the star. We want to be the supporting actor, which means we show up, join the local coalition, and bring veteran voices as messengers into this fight, because we have an outsized impact when we stand up and say, look, this isn't fair, especially when the narrative, like for someone like Josh Daniels or others, is, look, I've been overseas, I wore the uniform, I wore it recently, and I couldn't participate because I'm a registered independent, or because of the way the rules are stacked, or the ballot couldn't get to me in time for a runoff. Those are all valid arguments. So we have an outsized impact when we show up and join these coalitions. My invitation to you, if you're wondering, what do I do? Some of you are already deeply engaged, so that's not an issue. But if you're wondering, what do I do? There's a few things. One is, take a look at the resource I sent in the email yesterday, the activations that we've got available for you. It's all on the website. You can download the guide that's there. I'm blanking on the name on it, Eric. Help me.
The field manual?
The field manual, thanks. It's in the ready room. We're using some of that clever language. So the field manual has a bunch of things that you can go do right now on your own, unsupervised. If you need help, we'll help you, but just know that there's a list of things you can do, like writing an op-ed, posting something on social media, reaching out to the local ranked choice voting group, or sometimes it's a reform group, or sometimes it's an advocacy group, but reaching out to local partners saying, hey, I'm here. I'm the state leader for South Carolina for Veterans for Political Innovation, or Texas or Virginia or Montana. Just take that narrative and run with it, and then plug into whatever they're doing, and support them. So you can do that on your own. And then where bigger efforts come together, we'll work more closely with you. And part of what Eric and I do is we get on planes, we try to travel to where the hotspots are. So those are the things that you can be doing right now. If you need more support than that, let's talk about it. And if you feel like, there's nothing really happening, then that's okay too. Just sit tight, but stay with us. Please don't feel like, there's no role to play. It might be that there's nothing happening right now, but in time, I think this movement is going to be everywhere. And the last thing I'll say before we open up for conversation is, if you think about movements, whether it's cannabis or prohibition repeal, or slavery or reproductive rights, or whatever, pick your issue. A lot of things that seem impossible or not yet understood. Frankly, direct primaries, the way in which we got direct primaries back in the 1920s, 30s, was because the parties had taken the power from people. And so it felt like an impossible hurdle to give voters direct participation in elections through primaries. And it was impossible until it was inevitable. So this stuff goes very slowly. And then some state legalizes cannabis, or some state goes to a direct primary system, or some state moves to an open primary system. And then it goes everywhere quickly. And so, that's, I think, what we're on the cusp of. So enough pontificating by me. I'd love to go to you all for updates, things that you're seeing, ideas you've got. And I think Mike Cantwell, you had something, so I'm going to go to you first, and then others, feel free to raise your hand.
Hey, thanks a lot, Todd. Just wanted to update everybody on things that are going on in Virginia. And just to review a little bit, so Arlington County passed an ordinance to allow ranked choice voting for the upcoming primaries for their elections. And so they're rolling out some education on that and everything. But the big thing is it's going to happen, right? So there will be a ranked choice voting election. There's 240,000 people in Arlington County, so it'll affect a lot of people. Arlington is a deep blue place and everything like that. So that's a win, and that's something that's ongoing. And then there was just a roundtable discussion in Richmond, a live event where one of the county board members from Arlington went there to go speak and talk about how they implemented their ordinance in Arlington. So that's all good news. I just posted in the Slack last night about something I'm organizing called Ride for Ranked Choice Voting. The biggest thing is to create a whole bunch of FOMO. Todd, do you know what the FOMO means?
I live it every day. Yeah, fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, right? You don't want to miss out on this. I don't care how far you have to fly. All right, I'm gonna jab Eric a little bit. I don't care about daughters' birthdays or Mother's Day or anything like that. We need to get as many people to Virginia on the 12th and the 13th of May, which is a Friday and Saturday, to do a 50-mile one day and 50-mile the next day ride from Jamestown, Virginia to Richmond. And so unbelievable backdrops, beautiful places, all this historic significance of the beginning of America, Jamestown, the first seat of government, first, a representative democracy, and then up to Richmond, where we passed a whole bunch of plantations. So the scourge of slavery and plantations. And then we go to Richmond, which is also a hotbed of the voting rights movement 50 years ago. So along the way, we plan on having meetings with various mayors and county supervisors and other elected leaders to convince them to implement ranked choice voting in their cities and counties in Virginia. So as of right now, it is legal to make a local law to have ranked choice voting in your city or town. Doesn't affect presidential elections or anything like that. So it goes into the whole axiom of, start local and scale, right? So we want to convince these local elected leaders to implement it in their counties and cities. Obviously, the Hampton Roads area has hundreds of thousands of active duty and veterans in that area, and so a great opportunity to get together, have a sense of community, doing something that's good physical fitness and riding a bike, then sitting around the campfire and having some burgers, drinking some beers in the evenings and everything like that. So all the details are in the Slack. I'm available for any questions or anything like that. I'd like to hand it over to James right now, and he can talk a little bit about what he's doing in the Hampton Roads area.
Right. Well, what I have focused on, me and my campaign partner, Travis Davidson, he's out for today, but we've focused on civic groups that are willing to listen to the message. And there's been an awful lot that we've hit, and these are some that might be ideas for you in your town, like Sertoma. Anyone ever heard of Sertoma? That's Service to Mankind. Rotaries. We actually did a presentation for the local leadership of the NAACP here. We've been sponsored by ECPI University to use one of the rooms for our team meetings, and several other groups, including a Republican breakfast and a Democrat committee meeting. So just by calling up these groups and using the contacts that we glean from each one, and bouncing that off into another, we ask each one, hey, what groups do you know of that might be interested in hosting us? And we go to meetings and meet new people all the time, and it leads to another presentation somewhere else. So that's what we've been doing with the manpower or lack thereof that we've got down here. But it's growing. We've got an email list of well over 100 people in the Hampton Roads area. And we've got a team meeting tonight that I've been calling people to remind them to that they have an invitation to come. So things are happening, and one step at a time.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Thanks, Mike. That's great stuff out of Virginia. We've just seen wins on the board thanks to you two and others, and it's inspiring. Bob, let's go to you, and then Kevin, and then Henry.
Yeah, I have a couple of points real quickly. One, to a lot of the public that doesn't know much about the military, and that right now is a large percentage of America, there's the assumption that everybody in the military is a right-wing, gun-toting, whatever. And so I think that one of the things that gives this organization credibility is that it represents that we have both parties well represented as well as independents, and having some general figures about what percentage of VPI is Republican, Democrat, Independent gives us some credibility in that this is not a partisan effort. So that's one point. Secondly, I think this year, I was listening to the news yesterday, and the Republicans are really concerned this year that one candidate who's got a solid close to 30% might get the nomination because the rest of the 70% of Republicans' votes are going to be split amongst probably 10 other candidates. So I think this year might be really interesting in making the point, particularly with Republicans. Those are my 2 points.
Thanks, Bob.
Hey, Bob, can I just say one thing here? It's really important for everybody to understand that active duty military members can participate in an organization like VPI. They can participate in certain political activities, just not involved in partisan political activities. I'm somewhat of an expert in the Hatch Act. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But if you ever run into an active duty military person who says, oh, I can't go to that meeting, I can't talk to you because of the Hatch Act, it's just not true, right? So please, reach out to me or someone else if you have any questions about the Hatch Act.
Todd, do you have any rough figures on percentages of people in VPI who associate with different Republican, Independent, Democrat?
That's a good question. I don't think we capture that for VPI, and I think that is actually by design. I know that the military active duty is about 50% registered independent, and then there's sort of loud vocal minorities on both sides. But the trend line, so that's true in the military. So the military tends to be overrepresented as independents, and then young people are overrepresented as independents, and so that trend's only going to increase. I don't think we have it for VPI. Eric, do we? I don't believe we do.
Not an accurate number. I mean, I'm confident in saying, even just looking around here and the conversations we have, it's a pretty darn balanced mix of D's, R's, and I's that I'm looking at. And I'm a lifelong independent. I've never registered or joined with either political party, so I don't know who else falls into that here, but it's a good mix. It's a good mix, Bob.
I've joined all of them. So Eric hasn't joined any of them. I keep joining all of them, hoping I'll fall in love, and I've yet to. So I'm taking a look at the Forward Party.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob, for the comment. And opportunistically, we're going through the same thing here in Chicago. We've got a mayoral election, and there's 10 candidates, and the current mayor has a 14% approval rating. And she'll probably be the plurality vote getter with what'll probably be about 23%. And so the whole conversation about instant runoff is just skyrocketed because people are going, how do you have a city in which someone who has a 14% approval rating wins re-election? And it's about to happen, maybe. So there'll be some interesting political opportunities. I think that's how we want to think about it. Everyone else is going to be focused on who's winning today. Our view is, I don't really care about today. I want to take today's events and then sort of tell the story about, hey, how absurd it is that someone who is not popular but is still winning these elections. Like, how does that happen? Well, it's because of plurality election systems. That's how it happens. So we're playing with that narrative here in Chicago, and I think it'll be useful pretty soon. Thanks, Bob. Kevin, let's go to you, then Henry.
All right, thanks, Todd, et al. So I just wanted to address the language a little bit. Anybody who's been doing this now for a while knows how important the language can be when you're dealing with this. So one of the things we've learned in Wisconsin, don't use ranked choice voting. That's going to sink our efforts if we use that terminology. And so to James's question about the GOP or the RNC policy on ranked choice voting. So we had a meeting last week with some of our state partners, and the one person we've got who is extremely heavily involved with the Republican Party said, it's simple. We're not supporting ranked choice voting. We aren't looking to put in ranked choice voting. We want to do instant runoff. We want to do open primaries and final 5 or final 4 voting. Ranked choice voting, if you know, and then I know that's sort of the umbrella term, but people then they get this idea, yep, I'm going to have to go, I'm going to have to rank 30 people on a ballot. That's too complicated. No. So it's important to differentiate. Now, some places that might be exactly what you need, is to use that terminology. So you need to kind of find out what are the feelings, what are people looking at, so you don't turn them off with that initial language. And so you focus on open primaries and final 5 or final 4 voting, it simplifies things. You can really focus on, well, what does that mean? Well, here you go. And then you can bring in some examples. You can also then pass off on those complicated ones they've heard about. Whoa, look what happened in New York City. Look at that happened here. Say, no, we're not talking about that. So just knowing that, and that, again, our partner's comment on the, because he was like, yep, RNC came out with this policy letter that they're looking at. He said, but we just tell them, no, not to worry. We're not doing ranked choice voting. We're doing open primaries and final 5. And so just to keep that in mind as you have conversations with different people, you may get that kind of a response. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Really important point on the language here. Instant runoff voting is stronger frame. Part of why some Republicans like it is because it just saves money. So rather than having to drag people back to the ballot box for a runoff, you can just, it's an efficiency argument. Hey, we say Georgia could have saved $75 million in their runoff if they just had instant runoff. So we're kind of trying to create simplicity with that. I think it's a great point. Ranked choice voting has become a polarized term. So we got to move off of that as language and just talk about final 5, open primaries, or instant runoffs. That's where we're landing as well. We've scrubbed all of our materials. We're going through the website right now with that in mind. So thanks, Kevin, for that point. Henry.
Hey, everybody. So just because it's a fresh point, I think the language is incredibly important, but in Connecticut here, we don't have runoff. So I tried hard to change the language to instant runoff and differentiate between the different types of ranked choice voting, especially because in Connecticut we have, different elections with multiple winners, and we're not touching that right now. So, but I have to tell you, the effort to differentiate between instant runoff and multi-winner elections fell kind of short because, again, Connecticut doesn't have runoff. So we're like, what's the value here? So we went back to ranked choice voting for the language, with my my comments noted. But when I say what we have going on in Connecticut is pretty great. We have a bill which is supported by the governor based on an endorsement, which is a long story, but we're probably going to get a public hearing very soon. It's already in committee. I'm going to be testifying on behalf of an organization called Connecticut Voters First that I'm a part of. Probably also throw VPI in there, or at least submit testimony in writing with the VPI hat on, but testify in person or virtually as part of Connecticut Voters First. But that will be for ranked choice voting in certain circumstances, and we're still sort of negotiating with the governor's office exactly what we're going to use it for. But one of the things that I pushed for and got is a municipal option, kind of like Hoboken, Because right now Connecticut has a constitutional requirement for plurality voting in certain elections and a statutory requirement for plurality voting in municipal elections. So we're simply removing the statutory requirement for municipal elections, giving municipalities an option, and then it's going to take off from there. So a lot of great things going on. Probably going to testify pretty soon on that. And one quick note before I get off is the veteran voice is important. Like everyone explained, you know, limiting our ability to vote because of the structures, because of the systems. But also one thing that I've been trying to communicate to Connecticut folks is we're often, veterans bear the brunt of political dysfunction with both physical and moral injuries. And that's something that people need to hear. Like it can't all be fluffy stuff, like everyone's happy. And no, we're the ones that suffer the most from political dysfunction, I would argue. So some of these lawmakers need to hear that it's not just some technical change that would make things happier. It's a big deal. It's an incentive change to get our systems healthy again. So if you want to go in a little more somber direction, if it's appropriate, I would recommend language like that.
Thanks, Henry. I think that's powerful. Just the moral arguments of the political dysfunction, the whiplash that we see in international policy, the Afghanistan withdrawal, the burn pits legislation, like all of it got polarized. And it's the service members who bear the brunt, and they're not going to become political actors. They're just taking the hits. And so we are, you know, I think that moral outrage we should all feel, not just as voters and as citizens, but as veterans and the active duty folks. I'll give you one other argument that I'm playing with that's having some success in Indiana, which is a sort of a deep red state. But I'm talking to traditional, let's call them like establishment Republicans, traditional Republicans that are sort of the Mitch Daniels crowd of Indiana, or the George W. Bush crowd that sort of aren't sure where they sit today, or frankly, the pro-business community, the business community that is sort of not really firmly in any camp right now, kind of up for grabs, some of them. And it's the economic arguments of Final Five voting creates a stable political environment. You know, the least stable political environment is flipping from a far left to a far right. I mean, that's and it creates a giant chilling effect because everyone comes in wanting to do culture war stuff. And then the business community gets skittish and they look at it with fear of like, is this the kind of place where we want to be making a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment? So the economic arguments of this fundamentally stabilizes the governing environment, which allows for long-term policy action, can be attractive to states as a differentiator from an economic development standpoint as well. So something I've seen work. Doug, over to you.
Yeah, we're in our third week of our legislative session right now. In fact, I'm in the legislative building. We've been really having some really good headway here. There's a lot of turmoil going on within the Nevada Democratic Party. They have their state party elections coming up next month. And the division between the Harry Reid wing of the party and the folks that are currently control is actually being played out now in the media. And it could be something that permanently damages the Democratic Party. The outcome, it could cause a lot of Democrats to leave the party. In that light, we're picking up, a lot of interest in the minority community who are totally fed up with they've been treated by the Democratic Party, making some really good headway with younger voters, and bringing them in. Yesterday had a conversation with a 17-year-old who graduated high school last year. He's been very involved with Gun Sense for years. He was targeted by fellow students at his high school because of that involvement, and he just won a lawsuit against the Washoe County School District because the school did nothing to protect him. But he has 15,000 followers on Instagram. And my last question to him was, will you go ahead and reach out to your network and help us? And he's worked very closely with Catherine Cortez Masto campaign, the Reid team, and he's frustrated with them too. So his answer was yes. I'd be more than happy to. Also yesterday, during the pandemic, our state COVID czar, so to speak, is a veteran. I happened to meet him yesterday and was talking to him, mentioned VPI to him. He's very supportive of Final Five. He says, "Oh, I'm definitely going to go on VPI website." So that was so we're making a lot of headway, rolling into this year as we prepare to win the second time our initiative. And I've just got one question for Kevin and then a comment for Henry. I'm just curious, Kevin, how did that Republican lawmaker react when you told them, when he said we're for Final Five, and you said, "Oh, that's what I'm talking about"?
So the person I'm talking about, he's very heavily involved in supporting this. He's working in Wisconsin with one of the organizations who's trying to get the Final Five voting passed.
Okay.
But at the same time, he's been working to get a Republican governor elected and Republicans to the legislature. Very, very. So he's a great supporter because he is out there countering a lot of the GOP messaging against the instant runoff, Final Five types of things. And he's awesome at it because he really understands that point of view. So he can frame it in such a way. So we're really very lucky to have him helping us out here. And he's influential in national GOP politics. So a lot of the stuff he writes and posts and stuff is helping us across the country.
Okay, good. And Henry, a comment for you when you're talking about plurality in statute and in the Constitution. One thing we found in 2015 when we ran our first bill that was a top 3 bill with ranked choice, and our legislative lawyer said it violated the plurality clause of our Constitution. It really depends how your Constitution or your statute is written. If it says a plurality of total votes cast, you're correct. If it just says plurality, but doesn't define plurality, ranked choice voting, and this we found out from Fair Vote lawyers and from actually a former head of our legislative lawyers, that ranked choice voting technically is a plurality voting system because of exhausted ballots. The final round is a majority of that being tabulated in that round. It may or may not be a plurality of a majority of total votes cast. So that wording, and in fact, that's where Maine got into trouble because their Constitution says total votes cast. So just something to look at if they're bringing up, an issue with constitutionality of the plurality clause. How is that plurality clause written?
Yeah, that's fantastic because I don't think the word plurality is even in the Constitution. It's just something like the most votes or something. So I have to look at the language, but it's based on other people's interpretations. I mean, other people being like the Secretary of State, so it's not like nobody. But yeah, no, this is a great point. I'm going to dig into this probably right after this call. That's pretty exciting. And one quick thing too, I wanted to share with the group on sort of Kevin's point is Connecticut's super blue. So in an attempt to I would say balance, some of the folks who got involved in this, and I think he's going to actually testify with me, is like R Street Institute. Jonathan Bidlack, who happens to be from the New England area, has agreed to sort of join our coalition and testify. So for everyone on the call, you might have to try to, regardless of what your personal political affiliation is, try to right the ship, for lack of a better word, because most of these efforts get too much attention, like either all Democrats or all Republicans are doing one thing or the other. We can come in and sort of bring everyone together.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
This is great, guys. Really, really exciting. And if you are get to a point where you need some technical expertise, come to us. We can connect you with partners like Rank the Vote or election experts. We are not, and frankly, I don't think we ever will be, which is fine. I mean, we should all get as smart as we can, but really, the secret weapon that we bring to this is just the moral clarity that it doesn't have to be this way. And there is a path out, and voters deserve better. And we just need to keep pounding that. And to Henry's point, folks on active duty deserve better. So I think that's our secret power, is that we can cut through the noise in this moment in this country. And you're all doing that from your corner of the world. So I'm going to say just two things and kick it over to Eric. I mentioned that we'll be in Nebraska. If you know folks in Nebraska, please reach out to them on our behalf, invite them. We're going to host a happy hour at a brewery on March 2nd. We're giving testimony that afternoon, and then we're going to launch the chapter that evening with a social happy hour. They don't have to be veterans. They just, in fact, if you know folks that are politically involved or lobbyists or advocacy folks or veterans who are not political, invite them. March 2nd in Lincoln, Nebraska. And then we're going to be kind of gunning with these other campaigns as well. Eric and I, Q1 is sort of dedicated to fundraising and kind of putting the plan together for the year to make sure that we've got the resources. We've got some cool things coming your way. We're going to launch a swag store soon where you'll be able to get, vests and apparel for free as volunteers. We'll give that stuff to you. We'll give you copies of the book. The politics industry, as well as Dave McCormick has a book coming out around how to restore America, the American Promise. Dave ran for Senate in Pennsylvania, came up short to Dr. Oz in the Republican primary, but he's very supportive of what we're doing. West Point grad, phenomenal guy. So we're going to continue to try to strengthen the value proposition for you all with swag, books, and other things. Hopefully we'll get another book club meeting going. I don't think Isaac's on today, but I love that we did it once. We should do it again because there's a lot of literature that's increasingly coming out. If you haven't listened to the Mary Peltola interview that we did with her, first U.S. representative elected under a Final Four voting model out of Alaska, it's phenomenal. My favorite thing she says, someone says, because she's a Democrat, so Don Young, Republican, held the seat for 50 years, and then Mary Peltola won the seat. So it became a sort of a narrative in Republican circles that this thing's bad for us because how else could a Democrat win? And so someone asked her, what do you tell people that say this is just a Trojan horse for Democrats to win? And she very candidly was like, Democrats don't support this in Alaska. I mean, they didn't support me. So even though she's a Democrat, she's an independent, and she wasn't the establishment choice, and the establishment is still opposed. So I thought that was a powerful comeback. But listen to that interview where she talks about how she won, but also how a conservative Republican governor won, and a moderate U.S. Senator, Lisa Murkowski, also won. Same voters, same ballot, electing those three people, all three of whom are sort of not the establishment mold. And I think that was a powerful testament. So lots going on, but Eric, I want to kick it over to you for any other announcements to close this out as well.
Yeah, and I see two hands up. If real quick, we're trying to land the plane, but Chris, you want to give an update real quick from South Carolina? Oh, you're muted, brother.
Yeah, one of the things that we took advantage here with Better Ballots South Carolina is we went down to Nikki Haley's announcement. And it was a target-rich environment for politically motivated people. And so there are opportunities out there to get those target-rich, especially as we go into the election season. And we're getting people signed up to support this. They were in line for about 30 minutes before they opened up the doors. And there were 4 of us working it. And we got 30 signatures in 30 minutes. And that's just going up and talking to people who got the Republican message that we're not going to do ranked choice voting. We didn't say ranked choice voting. We used instant runoff. But that's what we're doing. We're looking at Better Ballots. We've got lobbying day up here the first week in March, in which we're going to go and talk to all of our representatives face to face as we try to get our initiative into committee this year. But these are the kind of things that we're looking at down here. And then we're going to try to see how well Eric plays at the American Legion and see if we can't get off that and take some of that and start talking to the American Legion folks down here. Start at the top there, and then we'll steal your talking points and then start hitting the American Legion posts out here.
That sounds like a great plan, Chris. Doug, do you have something real quick?
Yeah, just real quick, just to follow up with Todd mentioned about Mary Peltola. By the way, I'm in Nevada. We had a great webinar with Mary Peltola, with the Congresswoman. You can find that on vote-nevada.org. But also we actually have engaged her campaign staff, Sandra Cosgrove, Anton, who was her campaign manager, now is her deputy chief of staff. We brought him on. We've got their media team coming on, helping us. So do not be shy to reach out to Mary Peltola's office, to her chief, to Anton. They are willing to help this movement around the country. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's that whole campaign and what's happening in Alaska is completely different. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, and super inspiring that Congresswoman Peltola kept on a Republican chief of staff, and her new state director for Alaska is a Republican Army veteran who we're hoping to speak to in the next week or two. So real quick here, just to land the plane, we've mentioned there's some great upcoming events. I will be speaking to the American Legion's Washington conference on Monday. I dropped a link to our informal meetup. If you know anyone in DC who you want to get involved with this mission, send them to the meetup, ask them to RSVP. Todd mentioned then he and I will be in Omaha, Nebraska on Thursday the 2nd, hosting a happy hour there and in support of a hearing. Then Todd and I head to Austin, Texas for South by Southwest, where Todd will be moderating a panel. Oh, I said Omaha, I meant Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm still working on my Nebraska geography there. Apologies to anyone from Nebraska. But yeah, and then Austin for South by Southwest, Todd's moderating a really great panel. And we'll have some activations around that. So lots of good stuff coming up. Please check out the website if you haven't done so already. Click that link to take action and download the field manual. Sometimes people ask us, what can I be doing in my state? There's 5 great simple activations in the field manual. If you do any of those 5 at any time, that's a huge win for your state and for VPI. So, and if you need help or ideas, you know, there's people who've written op-eds and stuff that we can connect you with. So thanks for being here. Thank you for being on mission with us. We are confident that the right mission at the right time is a powerful remedy to some of this toxic tribalism and paralyzing polarization. So thank you for being on the right mission at the right time. Let's go get this done.
Beautiful. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody. Let's get her done. Talk to y'all soon.